B flat 13, it's one of my favorite chords. I almost never get to play it. Stick around, I'll tell you why. In the last video, we learned how to play drop 2 and drop 3 voicings and add color tones to your chords. If you missed that, you might want to check it out first. And this might also be a good time for you to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so back to the B flat 13. It's a big, full, rich chord, and that's the problem. You see, its range is over 2 octaves. And it includes the 9th and the 13th, and the root. That takes up a lot of space, not only just range-wise, but also harmonically. So now, if there's a bass player, I can't play the root. So, and if there's a singer or a horn player, I probably want to stay off of that top string because that's going to be right in the middle of their range. So we're down to this. And if there's a pianist, well, I probably shouldn't play the 9th or the 13th because they might be playing the flat 13. So we're back to thirds and sevenths again. So when and where and how can we use drop 2 and drop 3 voicings? Well, believe it or not, you can. But let's take a look at some different small group settings and see what works for each. Now, by far, the easiest and most creative situations are when there's just a bass player or a bass and drums along with a soloist. In that case, you can use 2, 3, 4-note voicings, and there's plenty of space for you to use those fuller voicings. Now, it's easy to fall in love with these voicings. They're pretty, they're a lot of fun, and they sound great, but you have to be careful with them. Sometimes the best sound isn't the right sound. Take a listen to this where I'm comping with just the rhythm section. Now that sounds fine. But now, listen to the same comping with a soloist. It's generated by Band in a Box. Now you can see that doesn't work at all. I'm not playing with the soloist at all. I'm not paying attention to them. And so whereas I sounded pretty good by itself, it doesn't sound so hot when we're playing with somebody else. We have to remember that our job is to make the soloist sound good. And so that leads us to rule number 1. Stay out of the way and support the soloist. To do that, you've really got to be listening to them. And I can't tell you how many young players don't really do that. And I was guilty of it myself at one time. It's really easy to get into these chords and just get into what you're doing and not realize that it doesn't really help the band sound any better. And in fact, is usually getting in the way. And so rule number 2 then is don't overplay. The level of richness of your voicings, the more color tones you're using, should be in inverse proportion to the activity. So if you're going to play thick voicings, then you've got to play pretty sparsely. Now, if you're playing shells or triads or basic chords, you can be pretty busy because it's just putting down foundation. But otherwise, back off. Now, take a listen to this version with the same rhythm section and soloist and a different approach to comping. So I think you'll agree that this was an example where less is more. I gave the soloist space to play, fed back a few ideas, and generally added things that made it better. So remember, comping means complement and accompany. So you want to interact and respond with your soloist. If the soloist doesn't respond, don't push it. Just sit back and be solid. And feel free to fill some space if they're leaving it for you. If not, don't worry about it. So leaving space is one of the biggest challenges of jazz comping. In other styles, the rhythm guitar player plays all the time. In jazz, you need to play more sparingly. It's not a steady rhythm. You play in response to what's happening, and you help things move forward and support your soloist. Sometimes that means letting a chord or two go by, but you still have to keep track of where you are. It's one of the reasons why you should be memorizing the sound of the songs and not just the chord changes. Now, if there's a pianist in the group, that's another challenge. Sometimes they're really sensitive and they leave space for you or they'll lay out. And then you can play drop 2 and drop 3 voicings just like we were doing as if you were playing in a trio. But other times they're pretty busy. And if that's the case, then you just need to stick to 2-note shells or even just lay out. If you're wondering how to pull all this together, sign up for a free trial lesson with me. I'll give you some exercises that'll help you find the right chords and rhythms, and as a bonus, I'll send you a free personal practice plan that I create just for you. Click the link in the description down below. So now one of the most common gigs for me right now is duos, where I'm accompanying either a singer or a horn player. And drop 3 voicings work great in combination with shell voicings. I think of these really as being shell voicings plus 1. And we're just adding a different color. So adding the 1 note adds a little bit of color, and they're low enough that they probably won't get into the soloist way, though you still got to be sensitive to that. You have to be careful with singers, too. Some like it when you embellish the chords, but many will have trouble finding their notes if you don't play it straight. Also, notice how much they embellish the melodies. If they're channeling Mariah Carey, just lay it down straight and let them do their thing. Now, there are a couple of other ways that you can use drop 2 and drop 3 voicings that don't really fall under the category of comping. Remember that first example that it didn't sound bad by itself, but chord soloing is one of the main ways you can use drop 2 voicings. It's a great way to take your solos to the next level. Wes Montgomery would usually play single note lines, then octaves, and then drop 2 chords. And of course, when playing solo, you can play whatever you want, but don't feel like you have to play roots all the time. Joe Pass used no root drop 2 voicings all the time in solos and trio. So thanks for watching. Your comments and questions are always greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like and share the video. See you next time.